now. I want to start with a quote from your book. You write, "A grand strategy for the digital age must be at least partly a strategy of connection. It must accept the ubiquity and power of networks and internalize both their opportunities and their threats." It strikes me what we saw yesterday is representative of the latter part of that statement.
Yes, and it's a great example of how we could have a perfect national security strategy with Russia, with China, with Iran, and get completely overturned by, in this case, a lone wolf, but a lone wolf inspired by a terrorist network that is not really run by any state. So that's definitely on the threat side, and there are countless network threats. There's also global criminals, arms traffickers, drug traffickers, traffickers in people. We've got to address those threats too.
You've written in previous books, and this book as well, about the disintegration of the state. Where does the state fit into this networked world?
So the state's the chessboard world for the most part, and it's very much alive. And we could be also talking about North Korea. That's a classic game of chicken, state to state, or think about it in chess terms. We do this, they do that, we do something else. So they're there. I don't want for a minute to say states are not really important. I'm just saying they're not enough, and that states obviously have to take account of non-state actors, but also CEOs or the heads of civic groups or universities, we call them non-state actors, I call them web actors. They're the actors in networks, and they're part of foreign policy too. I
wonder about how widely this has been embraced by the diplomatic community. You write about our former ambassador to the United Kingdom. He did embrace a networked world. He was eager to meet with those who were not state actors, to embrace a wider network of individuals and institutions. Is that being more widely accepted now?
Well, we'll see under this administration. I think we're getting pushed back a little into the kind of oak-paneled chessboard rooms. But Secretary Clinton and President Obama really believed you had to do network engagement. So that doesn't just mean broadcasting how great we are as a matter of public diplomacy. It meant going out and working with groups of entrepreneurs, so tech networks or groups of Muslim communities where you're really engaging in a kind of diplomacy, members of society. And then when you have those networks and there's a crisis, you can activate them not as kind of do my bidding, but as, hey, what are you hearing? But also, how can you help?
Going back to the chessboard, how radically different is this from structural realism, say, or the way that diplomacy was conducted several decades ago?
Chessboard goes back 400 years, really. I mean, it certainly goes back to sort of Kissinger's idol, Metternich, that kind of thing. I don't think it's changed very much. And again, as I would say, us in North Korea, us in the Soviet Union, back to England and Germany, that part hasn't changed. I think with the chessboard world, what we don't have are strategies, right? We can say, oh, there's a network. Well, how do we fight it? Well, we have to have a counter network. And if you think about Al-Qaeda or ISIL, Stan McChrystal took his special operators and created a very specific kind of network to fight Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And I'm saying you need to custom design those networks for lots of different purposes.
The book is applicable to the diplomatic community. It's applicable to the corporate sector as well. You bring up Stan McChrystal. He's now a consultant working on some of these issues in the private sector. How is he overlaying what he did with the military into the corporate world?
Well, the first thing he does now, if you're his client, is he will map the networks in any organization, because all of us know there are formal hierarchies and informal networks where a lot gets done. And then he'll look at whether or not those networks do what you need them to do. So just as one example, I write about innovation networks. Innovation networks, you need some number of people outside your organization and some number inside, and they need to be connected and managed in the right way.
Are you seeing any indications that this administration is embracing this kind of network there? We saw Secretary of State Rex Tillerson in East Asia recently. He talked about North Korea an awful lot on that trip and spoke about the need to reevaluate our policy toward the region. What do you make of that change in posture? Is it a change in the direction of what you're talking about here?
I would say if you look at President Trump or Secretary of State Tillerson, that's a pretty strong return to the chessboard world. But I think if you talk to H.R. McMaster or you talk to Secretary of Defense Mattis, they would say we can't survive without creating networks. We're facing network threats. We need networked responses. So it may take them a little while to see that, in fact, they can't just turn back the clock.